one of the frameworks that I want to share with you, but also for those that are watching or listening, it's a very simple question. It's how do you want to grow? And that's G.R.O.W. We're going to start there. And the very first, the G, it's your goals. But it's the way that you frame that goal conversation. And I call it the coffee or cocktail conversation. It's this. Imagine if we're having coffee or cocktails and it's 3 years from today or 12 months from today, some future horizon line, and you're in a really good place. The most important question that we have to answer first is, what are we drinking? Is it coffee or is it cocktails? And, you know, in some situations, and it was good that you referenced too, that the vulnerability that people are sharing with you at a leadership level is fantastic, because all transformation that leads to future growth starts by simply telling the truth about where you've been, where you're at, and where you want to go next. And so the reason I often frame a coffee or cocktail conversation with that is it breaks the ice. And we're going to go really quickly. Okay, so let's just say, well, let's play this in real time, Ryan. What are you drinking? It's a year from now, and you're in a great place. What are you drinking?
I'm a problematic one. I'm probably having like celery juice because I'm off caffeine and I'm off alcohol right now.
Hey, I've been there. And it's a great place to be. I've experimented with a lot of different things. So you know what? I'm going to have a celery juice with you. And so what I want you to do is I want you to leap ahead in your mind. It's 12 months from now, and I want you to pick up that celery juice, and I want you to take a sip of it. And as you're taking a sip of it, look back to this conversation today and just tell me everything that has happened for you between now until then for you to feel good about the progress that you're making around commercial banking. And then just stop. And then that's where they just literally leap ahead in their mind. They're living in that space. And what we've done by asking the question about what are you drinking, we've made it that much more real because we've brought in some other senses. We've brought in taste. We've brought in touch of the glass. It's becoming that much more real. So they're able to articulate that. And you're just listening. They're downloading. They're painting this picture. And even when working with executives in workshops, I actually have them take this to the next level. And then they do some strategic thinking and writing because it's even that much more powerful of an exercise. All right, pause. Now, I want everyone to come back to the present moment. Okay? The future that you just created in your mind on paper or in the conversation, what are the roadblocks that you can now perceive in the present moment that would prevent you from moving forward and making progress towards your stated goals for growth? Let's have that conversation. Download, write it, however you want to capture that knowledge. And then the last one is, okay, now thinking about those roadblocks, what are the opportunities to overcome those roadblocks? Maybe opportunities to create, to capture, to capitalize on something that we have now to overcome those roadblocks to begin to move forward towards those goals for growth. And that's beginning to paint this picture of clarity, because then it's like, okay, well, this is where we're going. This is why we're doing it. This is what stands in the way. What we haven't even talked about at this point is, well, what are we going to do next? And that's where the W comes into play. I don't even want to think about how we're going to solve this problem just yet, because a lot of times when we think about how we're going to solve it, the mind goes into a fixed state to where, you know what? And I learned this from Dan Sullivan at Strategic Coach. He wrote a book with Dr. Benjamin Hardy on this subject. The W is who before how. It's putting the who before the how. Well, who do we need to collaborate with externally? Who do we need to collaborate with internally to move towards this future state further, farther, faster? Who, not how, has been such a transformative model in my own mind, because then from there you can take, how do you want to grow? And then you lead that to growth, because you got G.R.O.W. and then you have the T. Now that's tools. Okay, what are the tools and technologies that we need? And then finally, the H is the how. How are we going to now move forward, and how are we going to measure progress along the way? Back to your point, if you're having this conversation with one executive, they might paint a certain picture in their mind, but has that perspective been socialized throughout the organization on senior leadership? Has that perspective been socialized at the board? Is there clarity, number one, and is there unification, number two? And I think that's where there's some good news too. And I want to come back to your point, because in your article, you provide 3 steps that are a path to put strategy before structure. And the very first step, I want to break this down, is to just simply understand what's out there. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think for me, before, and in some ways it ties actually into your imagine yourself having your celery juice, your coffee, or your cocktail, because what it says is that to stimulate ideas, to be able to understand what is possible, right? You need to be able to understand what others are doing and what is out there, right? So for me, it's like when I think about, well, why is it useful to attend a conference? Well, it depends what the conference is, right? But if you had to say to me, well, what conference should I attend? I would say, is there an opportunity for you to go to a place where you can be exposed to what people in your area that you regard to be exceptional are doing, and the kinds of people that you want to become, or the bank that you want to become, to get a sense of what they're up to? What are they doing? Now, it's not because you want to necessarily take that on, because it's likely that their strategy won't necessarily apply to you, but seeing those things can be the seed of inspiration to be able to get a sense of, okay, great, I get a sense of where I'm at, right? And you may not be, one of the things I love, and are you familiar with the book Crossing the Chasm?
Yes.
So I just love it, right? And for me, the framework of understanding where an organization is in the buying cycle, and are you an innovator, are you an early adopter, are you an early majority, a late majority? It's the difference of like, am I, for folks that are not aware of it, it's like, am I the innovator who 5 years ago was using augmented reality headsets and geeking out and hooking them up and connecting them to all my systems, where I'm going to use any new technology just because I love it? Or you, the laggard who today is still holding on firmly to your BlackBerry, right? It's like, where are you in that adoption life cycle? And the answer is that we're not all the same for every single thing in our lives, right? For some things, I might be an innovator. For other things, I might be a laggard. It depends. And that same thing applies to the banks. So as a bank, I may be an early adopter or an innovator within certain parts of my bank, but I may be a laggard in others. And I think that going out and just exploring the space and exploring the world and understanding what is out there, what are other folks doing, what is exciting, I think helps me to test and go, oh, that's interesting. I would never do that. Okay, but why? Oh, but that looks really exciting. That's appealing to me. Okay, why? And so when you then go back to the bank to think about, well, what am I doing when I'm drinking my celery juice? What have we done? What looks exciting to me? I'm not basing it just on my ideas right now today. I'm basing on the fact that I've actually gone out there to look around, see what actually folks are doing, to get a sense of things. And depending on the bank's business model and how cutting edge they need to be, will then dictate how far out you need to go venture to see what other folks are doing. And so to the extent that your strategy is critically dependent on you being at the cutting edge, well then, boy, oh boy, you're going to have to go out far, to find it. You're not going to find that at your average conference, right? You need to go out and have those other conversations. But, to the extent that that is not the case, that maybe your advantage is somewhere else. And let's say just, you're looking for just good technology to help you get to the next stages. Well, great. You need to familiarize yourself with what the options are out there.
I appreciate that, because that's actually one of the very first steps in the 4-step model we have around human transformation. Step number 1 is to see things differently. And it's a matter of perspective, because what is perspective? It's the sum of context and framing. And so if we are continuously reframing based upon new insight, new perspective, we're going to continuously see things differently. And when we see things differently, we're going to continuously think differently about what the future could possibly look like. You've used a very important question throughout this conversation here that I've picked up on, and it's one that I appreciate greatly. It's just the question of why. And it's the point, and I've talked about this on the podcast, and I talk about this with financial brand leaders. It's the need to be a curious kindergartner once again. And there's a bit of Socratic wisdom that goes into this. It's to know that I know nothing, because the world is moving at an exponential pace. And so we almost have to let go of what we know to create a new paradigm going forward based upon new knowledge. And so this idea of learning, it's a gap that I'm seeing right now through the research that we've been doing, where the majority, and I want to say it's about 79%, so almost 8 out of 10 financial brand leaders are investing anywhere between 1 to 2 hours or less per week in ongoing learning and development for themselves. And when we take that and look at some secondary perspective, and I want to say this was the CEO of AT&T back in 2014, 2015, he was recommending that leaders invest anywhere between 5 to 10 hours per week in ongoing learning and development so that they can continuously stay ahead, or at least on par with what is going on in the quote unquote real world. The other thing that I appreciated that you shared was, where are you going to learn? And a lot of it's going to come back to the strategy of the organization, because it may or may not be going to another traditional quote unquote banking conference. There might be more to learn by looking outside of what's going on and then bringing some of that knowledge and perspective back inside. And that creates tremendous new opportunities. And I want to bring here and wrap up on a practical perspective, because back to your point of your article, where you're making the case or the recommendation to put strategy before structure, you also make the case and recommendation to run pilot programs, because I think a lot of organizations think that whenever they're implementing some type of change, it has to be organization-wide, and it doesn't. We could start small, learn, iterate, and then apply that knowledge to the next iteration going forward. As we wrap up, what's a practical way that someone is listening, watching, could maybe bring the idea of a pilot in to their own organization to make micro improvements?
Yeah, I mean, I think of course it's heavily dependent on context, right? So it's heavily dependent on the area. But I think the challenge that I would give to people is simply asking the question, how can I test whether or not this will give me the outcome that I hope for? And what is the cheapest, most inexpensive test that I can run to be able to get a sense of this? And even if that's like doing so with what's the in where I'm from, we say putting things together with sticky tape and press stick. It's like duct tape.
Right.
Even this thing is like duct tape together behind the scenes. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. The question is, how do I run and simulate this thing to test and see if it'll even work, right? So if there's a particular promotion that I want to run and I want to see whether or not my clients will even want this, well, where are these clients? Go and interview them, go meet them, tell them you're offering it and offer it to like 3 people and then honor it. And even if you got to manually do it behind the scenes, use that to be able to get the feedback and test it. If it's a new technology, how can you roll this out in a single branch with a single banker who loves tech and will be able to, give this thing a real go before you need to worry about, kind of running this thing through the core and putting it through all your vendor due diligence processes and procedures. How do you just get nimble with some of these pieces? And potentially, often then the break becomes, oh, but it's bank data, it's sensitive information. Okay, great. Then cut that out. Make sure you do it without any sensitive information. Because I'm not suggesting people take on undue risk. You can be nimble and move fast without taking on unnecessary risk. So then make sure that you sanitize it and tell the vendor, hey, you're not allowed to do this with any bank sensitive data. All that stuff is manual. Now, what could you do? How do we test this thing out? Otherwise, your innovation cycles are like 18 months.
Yeah.
And that's too slow.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great recommendation going forward. It's to obviously test, but it's also then to have those conversations with the people, both internally but also externally, and get some of that human-centric feedback, which leads to continuous human transformation that can coincide with digital transformation going forward. Ryan, this has been such a fantastic discussion today. I thank you for your perspectives that you have shared to help those watching, help those listening, see things maybe just a little bit different. And if it's, to the point of James Clear of Atomic Habits, maybe it's just that 1% that they're taking here going forward that will continue to spur their innovation, their growth into the future.